We are ready.
Ready.
All right.
Ready
Hi.
to rock and roll on session number 91.
Wow. 91.
The last letter we received was actually from HPB, but she hinted that she, at some point during the writing of that letter, had been overshadowed by KH. She's going to give a little more information about that in this next letter. Sinnett, of course, was back in London. She was in Würzburg at the time, working on the Secret Doctrine. We have given you a couple of excerpts from Countess Wachtmeister about her experiences with HPB. And we're going to give some more because this is so important, this whole period when she is working on the Secret Doctrine is important to get enough detail in the story that we are able to piece things together as to what was going on behind the scenes with the various people that the Mahatmas had tried to work with in the past, but now have had to retreat from that. They're no longer working directly with individuals. They're instead working through HPB to try to influence them. The Europeans who were still at Adyar were given the opportunity of receiving instructions from the Asian chelas, and they rejected that. They did not want to do that.
Did they think the Asian chelas were not in communication with the actual masters?
No, they just thought their intellect was inferior, and they thought that that was beneath them to have to take instructions from Asians. Mm-hmm. So HPB said, okay, I will volunteer myself. And that's what she is doing at this point. But she's not quite sure how this is going to work out. She's still trying to figure it out. We're going to go back in time to when she first arrived in Würzburg. So,
what was HPB's health like at this point?
Terrible.
So I thought so. So the masters were still intending to withdraw their direct contact with anyone but her and use her as the conduit to spread the teachings.
And right now she's doing that mostly through letters. Let's describe that a little bit. When she left Adyar at the end of March 1885, now let's retrace. She arrived together with Leadbeater and the Cooper Oakleys, husband and wife, at about the 21st of December, 1884. They arrived around December 21st. She left March 31st, 3 months later. And in the meantime, she had encountered all of this chaos that was going on between Hume, Hartman, Richard Hodgson, who was collecting information, even George Lane Fox was causing trouble. All of the Europeans who were there, and Olcott, once again, as soon as the convention was over, went back out on his tours in Ceylon and other parts of Asia. So he was almost never at the headquarters, very, very seldom. And she was left sick as could be, trying to fend off all of these predators around her. When her doctor, who was a theosophist, told her, you have got to get out of here. Between the climate and the chaos at headquarters, you will not survive. You will not survive. And so she was not even able to walk at the time. She had to be lifted onto the ship with the cargo carrier that lifts the cargo onto the ship. Jeez. That's how they got her in a chair to the ship.
Just out of curiosity, what was wrong with her legs, or was she just weak, energy-wise?
Everything, her kidneys, her liver, her legs. She had always had
Edema.
Trouble with her legs.
Okay.
Ever since 1875, during the early part of that year, she had fallen on the sidewalk.
Oh,
and ever since then, she had trouble with one leg particularly. But remember that at that time, her doctor, who was very intrigued with her teachings and was close to her, suggested more than once amputating that leg. And she said, absolutely not. She says, I'm taking my leg with me when I die, and if that's the cause of my death, then so be it. All right. This, again, is from our book, Reminiscences of H.P. Blavatsky and the Secret Doctrine. Countess Wachtmeister is such a good resource because she's very calm. She's very in sync with HPB. They lived together for about 3 years, and their energy was really good together. Other people would kind of clash with her. She was deferential when she needed to be, but she would also be able to talk to her as someone who could somewhat control her when she was getting out of control emotionally.
Wow.
But without putting her down or making her feel inferior. Nothing of that sort. She was always really good at just being a very calm influence on her. And she was also psychic. She picked up on a lot of things. Remember, we told you once before, but I'll repeat it again. She was on her way to Italy for a vacation, and she stopped at Elberfeld to visit Madame Gebhardt, who was a friend of hers. And Madame Gebhardt told her that HPB was really in bad shape physically and needed some help. So the Countess wrote a letter to her and offered to come. And she was very disappointed when HPB wrote back and said, no, don't come. I'll be fine without you. And so she was very disappointed, but she went ahead and was going to travel to Rome when she got an urgent telegram saying, Master says you need to come now. So once again, and she found out when she arrived that the reason was because the quarters, the apartment at Würzburg was very small. There was only one bedroom, and she said, I was afraid that you, being a society woman, would not be willing to share a bedroom with me. So she said, but I've bought a screen so we can each have a section, and I think we'll get along. So that's why she was reluctant at first. So they did share a common room at night, but with a screen between them. Countess Wachtmeister describes what a typical day was like when she first arrived.
The description of a single day will serve to give an idea of the routine of her life at this time. At 6 o'clock, I was awakened by the servant coming with a cup of coffee for Madame Blavatsky, who, after this slight refreshment, rose and dressed, and by 7 o'clock was at her desk in the sitting room.
The servant was Swiss, but she was hired at Würzburg, and then when she later went to Ostend in Belgium, she went with her. But she then went back home after she left Ostend.
She told me that this was her invariable habit and that breakfast would be served at 8. So she starts working before breakfast.
Yes.
Secret Doctrine, that takes a lot of work.
Yes. And in her article about practical occultism, she suggests when you wake up in the morning, get up immediately. Don't lie in bed.
That makes sense.
And she practiced that.
Yeah. You're not only fresh, but your consciousness isn't enmeshed in the physical world as much yet, and you're not thinking about things to do, and you haven't been susceptible to energy from all the chaos.
For most of us, that's the time when we meditate.
Yeah.
We're still in this receptive state, and that's a very good time to meditate.
Or work on these things.
For her, her work was her meditation.
After breakfast, she settled herself at her writing desk. That would be, again, right? Yeah, for the second time. And the day's work began in earnest. At 1 o'clock, dinner was served.
Yes. In those days, and even when I was a kid, dinner was the meal at noon. And What we ate in the evening was supper.
Oh, okay, supper.
It was lighter. The main meal was in the middle of the day, not at the end of the day.
But then don't you want to take a nap after the main meal?
Usually that's the time of siesta for
right.
many countries.
Yeah.
Including Europe. When I lived in France, many businesses closed down between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock.
The French were copying Spain?
Yes, exactly.
Don't tell them that they were copying Spain. That's funny. At 1 o'clock, dinner was served, whereupon I rang a small hand bell to call HPB. Sometimes she would come in at once, but at other times her door would remain closed hour after hour until our Swiss maid would come to me almost with tears in her eyes to ask what was to be done about Madame's dinner, which was either getting cold or dried up, burnt, and utterly spoiled. At last, HPB would come in, weary with so many hours of exhausting labor and fasting. Then another dinner would be cooked, or I would send to the hotel to get her some nourishing food. At 7 o'clock, she laid aside her writing, and after tea, we would spend a pleasant evening together.
So they called their evening meal tea because it was light. Tea in Britain is not just tea. It's also like
snacks.
Snack.
Right.
Yeah.
There's some fancy schmancy hotels here that offer afternoon tea, and I've been to one or two, and it's little bite-sized sandwiches and cornichons and different things with a variety of tea. They're trying to bring it back or introduce it to the...
It's a big thing in England.
Yeah, that's funny. But they're doing it at 7 or after 7.
Right.
That's late.
And that was HPB's idea. That's how she wanted to work, because you'll see what happens after that.
That's a lot of hours of just sitting and working. That's a lot. Wow.
Sitting and working.
Yeah. Comfortably seated in her big armchair, HPB used to arrange her cards for a game of patience.
Solitaire.
As she said, to rest her mind. It seems as if the mechanical process of laying her cards enabled her mind to free itself from the pressure of concentrated labor during the day's work. Makes sense. Like a discharge of sorts. That's cool.
Yeah, and she would actually carry on conversations while she's playing this game. So it's kind of a way for her just to relax and still be doing something, but her focus is really on the conversation.
I see. She never cared to talk of theosophy in the evenings.
Yeah, that would change later, though. But it was because she had spent so many hours during the day that she just needed to relax after that. She always was very social, though. If she had agreeable people around her, she would talk for hours.
The mental tension during the day was so severe that she needed above all things rest, and so I procured as many journals and magazines as I could, and from these I would read the articles and passages that I thought most likely to interest and amuse her. At 9 o'clock, she went to bed, where she would surround herself with her Russian newspapers and read them until a late hour.
Oh, yes. She always kept up to date with the happenings in Russia.
It was thus our days passed in the same routine, the only change worth noticing being that sometimes she would leave the door open between her writing room and the dining room where I sat, and then from time to time we would converse together, or I would write letters for her, or discuss the contents of those we had received.
So she was kind of a secretary and confidant, all wrapped in one, and a friend more than anything. They worked really, really well together. This next segment that we're going to read will show the fact that they both slept in the same room, but with this screen dividing them.
As I have already remarked, HPB was accustomed to read her Russian newspapers at night after retiring, and it was rarely that she extinguished her lamp before midnight. There was a screen between my bed and this lamp, but nevertheless its powerful rays, reflected from ceiling and walls, often disturbed my rest. One night, this lamp was burning after the clock had struck 1. I could not sleep, and as I heard HPB's regular breathing, that she slept, I rose, gently walked round to the lamp, and turned it out. There was always a dim light pervading the bedroom, which came from a night light burning in the study. the door between that room and the bedroom being kept open. I had extinguished the lamp and was going back when it flamed up again, and the room was brightly illuminated. I thought to myself, what a strange lamp. I suppose the spring does not act. So I put my hand again on the spring and watched until every vestige of flame was extinct, and even then held down the spring for a minute. Then I released it and stood for a moment longer watching when, to my surprise, the flame reappeared and the lamp was burning as brightly as ever. This puzzled me considerably, and I determined to stand there by that lamp and put it out all through the night, if necessary, until I discovered the why and wherefore of its eccentricities. For the third time, I pressed the spring and turned it down until the lamp was quite out, and then released it, watching eagerly to see what would take place.
And what happened?
For the third time, the lamp burned up, and this time I saw a brown hand slowly and gently turning the knob of the lamp. What the heck? Familiar as I was with the action of astral forces and astral entities on the physical plane, I had no difficulty in coming to the conclusion that it was the hand of a chela, a brown hand.
Uh-huh.
That's funny. And surmising that there was some reason why the lamp should remain alight, I returned to my couch. Good. I'm glad she realized after 3 times.
Yeah. Then let's see what happens after that.
I'm surprised the hand didn't go. That's funny.
No, and she was quite determined, as we see. She had a very strong mind of her own.
Mm-hmm. But a spirit of perversity and curiosity dwelt within me that night.
That's one aspect of her personality that doesn't come out very often.
I wanted to know more, so I called out, Madame Blavatsky. Then louder, Madame Blavatsky, and again, Madame Blavatsky. Suddenly I heard an answering cry, oh, my heart, Countess, you have nearly killed me. And then again, my heart. I flew to HPB's bedside. I was with Master, she murmured. Why did you call me back? Oh. I was thoroughly alarmed, for her heart fluttered under my hand with wild palpitation. Oh my goodness. I gave her a dose of digitalis and sat beside her until the symptoms had abated and she had become calmer. Then she told me how Colonel Olcott had once nearly killed her in the same way, by calling her back suddenly when her astral form was absent from her body. She made me promise that I would never try experiments with her again, and this promise I readily gave, out of the fullness of my grief and contrition for having caused her such suffering.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So again, we see the kindness and the gentleness that she had, except for this moment of perversity, as she says.
Yeah, the light being lit must have had something to do with the communication going on.
Something, I'm not sure what. It may be that there are times when they show them something in the astral light, and there may need to be some degree of light in the room for that to happen. I don't know.
Physical light, fire maybe, or something?
Yeah, I honestly don't know why the reason would be for that.
A brown hand appeared.
See, this is the cool stuff about what goes on behind the scenes that most people would never know about. This didn't come out until 2 years after HPB died, so very few people ever heard that story before that.
Very, very interesting.
Now, we're going to hear about the period after the Hodgson report came out. So that would have been at the end of 1885 and then into the beginning of 1886. And she describes several different things that were going on.
It is little to be wondered at that the progress of the Secret Doctrine was brought to a standstill during these stormy days, and that when, at last, the work was resumed, the necessary detachment and tranquility of mind were found hard of attainment. Wow, so just so I'm clear, the Hodgson report was damning. It was a nail in the coffin kind of.
She's the most consummate fraud in the world of spiritualism and spiritual phenomena.
And the Secret Doctrine hadn't even come out yet.
No.
Interesting. HPB said to me one evening, "You cannot imagine what it is to feel so many adverse thoughts and currents directed against you."
These were both from enemies and former friends.
That's crazy. It is like the prickings of 1,000 needles. And I have continually to be erecting a wall of protection around me. I asked her whether she knew from whom these unfriendly thoughts came. She answered, "Yes, unfortunately I do. And I'm always trying to shut my eyes so as not to see and know."
So she can feel these thoughts before any other indication that these people are sending negative, nasty energy towards her.
Well, it's the same reason why the masters stay so hidden from the world. Same exact reason.
And notice that she says she has to be constantly erecting a barrier to protect herself from those thoughts. That's exactly what the Mahatmas have to do, waste energy to protect themselves. And we wonder why they stay hidden.
Yeah. And we wonder why more enlightened people don't run for political office, because they don't want to be famous. That's terrible for their energy. Yes, unfortunately I do, and I'm always trying to shut my eyes so as not to see and know. And to prove to me that this was the case, she would tell me of letters that had been written, quoting passages from them, and these actually arrived a day or two afterwards, I being able to verify the correctness of the sentences.
Mm-hmm. So she can feel the energy as they're writing this nasty letter to her. And then a few days later, here comes the letter.
Wow. One day at this time, when I walked into HPB's writing room, I found the floor strewn with sheets of discarded manuscript. I asked the meaning of this scene of confusion, and she replied, "Yes, I have tried 12 times to write this one page correctly, and each time Master says it is wrong. I think I shall go mad writing it so often, but leave me alone. I will not pause until I have conquered it, even if I have to go on all night." I brought a cup of coffee to refresh and sustain her, and then left her to prosecute her weary task. An hour later, I heard her voice calling me, and on entering found that, at last, the passage was completed to satisfaction. But the labor had been terrible, and the results were often, at this time, small and uncertain. As she leaned back, enjoying her cigarette and the sense of relief from arduous effort, I rested on the arm of her great chair and asked how it was she could make mistakes in setting down what was given to her. She said, "Well, you see, what I do is this. I make what I can only describe as a sort of vacuum in the air before me, and fix my sight and will upon it. And soon scene after scene passes before me like the successive pictures of a diorama. Or if I need a reference or information from some book, I fix my mind intently, and the astral counterpart of the book appears." That's all her, though, right? That wouldn't be the master helping with that.
No, it is.
Oh, okay.
So all she does is prepare this space and become receptive, and then whoever the Mahatma is that is working with her at the time presents what would be like a video for us today.
That part, but then she says, if I need a reference or information from some book, I fix my mind intently, and the astral counterpart of the book appears. So she's not conjuring that. She's being shown it from the master. So
she's in her mind saying, all right, I need this book, and then they provide that book.
Okay.
She didn't have any books to speak of, none. Oh. She had a few French novels that she had picked up, and all of the publications she received from her family telling of things going on back in Russia. She had no library at all, except just a very few books that she had brought with her. And yet people claim she copied all of this.
She fixes her mind intently, and the astral counterpart of the book appears, and from it I take what I need. The more perfectly my mind is freed from distractions and mortifications, the more energy and intentness it possesses, the more easily I can do this. But today, after all the vexations I have undergone in consequence of the letter from X, I could not concentrate properly, and each time I tried, I got the quotations all wrong. Master says it is right now, so let us go in and have some tea.
It shows that in order to work efficiently and properly, She has to not be distracted by anything else. This has to absorb her entire focus. So when she was receiving these letters from former friends complaining bitterly and denouncing her and castigating her, that was at the back of her mind. How can she work? That's exactly what was going on here. As far as the hand of the chela, in a different place in this book, the Countess mentions that every evening, starting at 10 o'clock, and she said it got to where I would check with my watch to see what was going on. At 10 o'clock p.m., there would be like a little chime. And every 10 minutes on the dot, that little chime would sound. Obviously, it wasn't so loud that they couldn't sleep through that. But she said for months that went on. And she said she finally decided in her mind that that must be the signal that the chela, who was on watch, was still on watch and had not left the post, because someone had to be watching her physical body all night long. And often it was a chela. Most often it was a chela.
So it didn't mean that she was with Master every night.
No.
It was just that.
It meant that the person who was on watch was doing his job.
I wonder if it was to let HPV know.
And the masters, because the Mahatmas have other work to do constantly.
Right.
So they can't be stopping every 10 minutes to check on her. Mm-hmm. They assign somebody to do that. And that way, if something happens, that chela could alert them immediately.
I wonder if the chela at that level of development, those chelas that are assigned, I wonder if they're able to sleep and do that, like if they're physical, because it's the middle of the night, it's all night long.
I doubt it. They would have to
be awake physically.
Most of them, remember, don't develop that kind of awareness until they become a full adept, not even just a beginning adept, a full adept.
And since she's in Germany at the time.
She's in Germany.
India, which is probably where the chelas are, would be, 4 or 5 hours later. So it would definitely be the middle of the night. They'd need to be awake. Wow.
Right.
Interesting.
Now we're going to look at one more still. And this is about another chela. She's going to give us some information about a Hindu gentleman who HPB had met early on when she was in India.
I have previously not alluded to the presence at Würzburg of a Hindu gentleman who, for a time, was a prominent figure in our little society.
So he came to Würzburg, but HPB had met him several years before.
It was at Adyar one day that an Indian, begrimed with dirt, clad in tattered garments, and with a miserable expression of countenance, made his way into Madame Blavatsky's presence. He cast himself at her feet, and with tears in his voice and eyes, entreated her to save him.
Now this sounds a lot like Mirza Murad Ali Beg, but it's not. This is an Indian chela.
On inquiry, it appeared that, in a mood of religious exaltation, he had wandered away into the jungle with the intention of renouncing society, becoming a forest dweller, and devoting himself to religious contemplation and yoga practices.
So, a sannyasin.
Or a renunciate. Sannyasin, yeah.
Right.
Here he had joined a yogi who was willing to accept him as his chela or pupil, and had spent some time in study of the difficult and dangerous system of hatha yoga.
Yeah, this again is another indication that Europeans didn't really understand what hatha yoga was. In their mind, it was more like Tantra yoga, specifically. Right. We know that hatha yoga is not specific. That is only one aspect of a yogi who has studied yoga for many years.
Just so I'm clear, let's see, the chela came to her after he had done this?
Yes.
Okay.
So he was fanatical. in his intention to gain enlightenment. He was willing to do anything, but he wasn't quite as ethical as Damodar was.
I'll read that last sentence again. Here he had joined a yogi who was willing to accept him as his chela or pupil and had spent some time in study of the difficult and dangerous system of Hatha Yoga, a system which relies almost exclusively on physiological processes for the development of psychic powers. And you're right. I mean, that is part of what Hatha Yoga is, but it's...
This sounds exactly like Mr. Hume and his Swami from Almora. He was willing to teach what the Mahatmas weren't willing to teach him.
There is, in large part, a misunderstanding about what the purpose of Hatha Yoga is. And yes, we've said many times in our sessions that psychic powers do develop over time and they can be forced, which is what this sounds like.
That's exactly it. The Mahatmas say it should always come naturally. It should never be forced.
The intention gets perverted, I'll say, even, because Hatha Yoga is purificatory. Is that a word?
Well, Rāja Yoga is, well, both are.
Of the physical, though, the Hatha system is designed to help you become fit and ready and prepared for the heightened energies, but not with the intention to get the energy, the Kundalini rising.
All right.
Prepare.
So I think what you're trying to say is you can start with Hatha Yoga for the physical purification,
yes,
but at the same time or very soon after doing that, you need to go to Rāja Yoga.
And purify the
which
mind.
tells you how to purify emotions
Yes.
and mind.
Both are
then
necessary.
all three of the lower aspects of your personality, of yourself, are all pure, all three of them.
And these higher energies and powers, I think we've said this in 100 different ways before, they can develop by way of doing one or the other, but it's not recommended, especially the Hatha way without the Rāja way. The Rāja way without the Hatha way could happen also, but it's not recommended because you need a certain degree of physical strength, stamina, health, circulation of blood, so prana can flow through your body. Both are needed. It can't be just one or the other.
Remember that the work the Mahatmas do is 100% energy, manipulation of energy.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the purity, guess where you're going to direct that energy?
To selfish things.
Selfish things that help you and your ego. This is the case with this Hindu gentleman.
And it's the case we've heard many times. You know, in its purest sense, maybe I shouldn't say purest sense, but in a pure sense, the word Tantra that you mentioned a moment ago can be described like you just said as the masters are using it. The masters use energy. I know it's not going to be widely accepted to think of the masters as tantrics, but when they use energy for those reasons, for the highest reasons, to do the work of the masters, that could be considered tantric yoga because it's energy work, but it's pure. It's for the highest good. It's not for anything selfish. We shouldn't only think of Tantra as the selfish part, but people do.
Yes, and both in India and in the Western world, Tantra has become associated with sexual practices.
Selfish.
And so for that reason alone, the Mahatmas almost never mentioned the word Tantra.
Right.
In fact, they pointed out to Sinnett that when Hume referred to them as Tantrikists, or as tantrists, that was not meant as a compliment.
Right, in the context, yes. I'm interested to see how this plays out. So, Hatha Yoga, a system which relies almost exclusively on physiological processes for the development of psychic powers, like breathing techniques, holding the breath, contracting different muscles for a period of time, and using the mental component of fire and such.
To become clairvoyant, but
that
on
intention.
The astral plane.
Yeah. At last, overcome by terror at his experiences, see, you can do this. You can get to the astral sight and you can rip the veil away. But how many times have we said this already? We've probably said it 92 times now in all the sessions. Overcome by terror at his experiences and the formidable training he had to undergo, he made his escape from his guru. Good for him.
Yeah.
Good for him that he got away.
Yeah. And remember, Mirza Murad Ali Beg had been working with a black magician to develop psychic powers in order to manipulate a woman into falling in love with him.
A married woman, right? And then it caused her tremendous...
It didn't say whether she was married or not, but she obviously engaged in sexual activity with him and only later realized what she had done.
But it causes a ripple effect of problems that many people don't realize because they just want to do something for themselves. It's a butterfly effect of negativity, usually. He has made his escape from his guru. By what circumstances he was led to HPB does not appear, but he reached her, and she comforted him and calmed his mind. I wonder how he found her. That's interesting. But he knew about her before, maybe?
He may have just heard, because she was becoming famous in India, and he may have just heard of her the same way Damodar did.
By what circumstances he was led to HPB does not appear, but he reached her, and she comforted him and calmed his mind, clothed and fed him, and then, at his request, began to teach him the truly spiritual path of development, the Rāja Yoga philosophy.
Oh,
wow, they haven't mentioned that.
They have, not often enough. Same person came to visit. Guess who we're talking about?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Keep reading.
In return, he vowed a lifelong devotion. And when she left India for Europe... So she's talking about when HPB first met him in India, took care of him. Correct. This is all taking place in India. And now she's switching. All of that took place in India. He comes to her for help, and she took care of him, but it was a long time ago. In return, he vowed a lifelong devotion, and when she left India for Europe, he persuaded her to bring him with her. He was a little man of nervous temperament with bright, beady eyes. During the first few days that I spent at Würzburg, he was forever talking to me, translating stories from his Tamil books, and relating all sorts of wonderful adventures that had happened to him when he was in the forest with his Hatha Yoga master. But he did not remain long in Würzburg. Madame Gebhard sent him a cordial invitation to pay her a visit at Elberfeld. And so one morning, after an effusive scene of leave-taking with HPB, during which he declared she had been more than a mother to him, that the days he had spent with her had been the happiest of his life, he departed, I regret to say, never to return. Too soon, flattery turned his head and his heart, and the poor little man was false to all that should have been most sacred to him.
The little man, that's the key word. We're talking about who?
The little man was named, what was his name?
Babaji.
That's Babaji. Wow.
So he did become a probationary chela of KH, I believe it was. And
after this, when he left never to be seen, prior to
while he was still in India, he was a probationary chela. Remember, he was sent to teach Sinnett, but because he hadn't made much progress yet, Darbagiri Nath, who was a higher chela, was allowed to use his body because Darbagiri Nath was going through some training that didn't allow him to be in the outer world at all. But he was allowed to go into Babaji's body and teach Sinnett more than once. Sinnett never did figure out what was going on. He was being tested himself, and he failed miserably. But that was Babaji, and we haven't heard the last of him yet. Now, one more thing, and then we'll get on with letter number 141. While she was in Würzburg, and before she went to Ostend, Madame Blavatsky was visited by her sister and her sister's daughter. Remember Vera and Vera?
Yeah.
Vera and Vera, her sister and her niece. So she, the niece, was quite young. She ended up marrying an Englishman, And she went to visit them. And Countess Wachtmeister asked her and other people to send their reminiscences to include in this book. So this is from her niece.
Dear Countess Wachtmeister, in June 1886, I stayed with my aunt in Elberfeld and then in Ostend.
So they actually met up with her while she was visiting Madame Gebhardt and her family.
It was her habit to read out in the afternoon what was written of the Secret Doctrine in the preceding night. That's cool. Not knowing much English then, I am sorry to say I was seldom present at these readings and only half understood the conversations that ensued, so that my contribution to your interesting book must be very small. Generally, on coming down in the morning from the bedroom I occupied in the house of Madame Gebhardt, together with my mother, I found my aunt deep in her work. So far as I know, she never wrote at that time in the morning, but carefully went over what was written the previous night. One day I saw evident traces of perplexity written on her face. Evident traces of perplexity written on her face. Not wishing to disturb her, I sat down quietly and waited for her to speak. She remained silent a long time with her eyes fixed on some point on the wall and with a cigarette between her fingers, as was her custom. At last, she called out to me. "Vera," she said, "do you think you could tell me what is a pie?" Rather astonished at such a question, I said I thought a pie was some kind of an English dish. Like a meat pie or a mince pie or something. "Please don't make a fool of yourself," she said rather impatiently. "Don't you understand? I address you in your capacity of a mathematical pundit. Come and see this." I looked at the page that lay before her on the table and saw it was covered with figures and calculations, and soon became aware that the formula pi equals 3,14159 was put down wrongly throughout them all. It was written pi equals 31,4159.
And for those who are Americans, in the rest of the world, they use a comma rather than a point. We would say 3 point. They use 3 comma.
With great joy and triumph, I hastened to inform her of her mistake. "That's it," she exclaimed. "This confounded comma bothered me all the morning. I was rather in a hurry yesterday to put down what I saw, and today, at the first glance at the page, I intensely but vaguely felt there was something wrong. And do what I could not remember where the comma actually was when I saw this number."
So she saw it right before her, but she wrote it down incorrectly. Now she's like, I know it's wrong, but I can't figure out what it was supposed to be.
This is evidence that she really doesn't always know what she's writing.
No, and keep reading.
What is a pie?
What is a pie?
Yeah.
A pie.
Yeah. Knowing very little of theosophy in general and my aunt's ways of writing in particular at that time, I, of course, was greatly struck with her not being able to correct such a slight mistake in the very intricate calculations she had written down with her own hand.
And this was very common. People would say, well, why can't you just write what you see? It should be easy.
"You are very green," she said, "if you think that I actually know and understand all the things I write." She said that before, many times.
Mm-hmm.
"How many times am I to repeat to you and your mother that the things I write are dictated to me, that sometimes I see manuscripts, numbers, and words before my eyes of which I never knew anything?"
Mm-hmm. She learned the Secret Doctrine by writing the Secret Doctrine. And I'm sure she didn't even then remember everything. Takes more than one time. So, yeah, that's the setup now for this next letter.
I mean, how many times have you gone through the Mahatma letters before this time? I mean,
this is, I'm guessing, the 5th time.
There you go.
Reading them completely and carefully. First 2 or 3 times, it was a struggle to slog through it.
Yeah.
And only this time am I really, really understanding it. So that's how you do it. But it has to be studied not just academically, but with intuition. If you don't have any intuition, if you have no insight, you can read it 100 times and you still won't understand it.
And you certainly wouldn't have had the wherewithal to find the other books and find the places in the other books where references are made in the letters to make the letters make more sense, and then have the idea to connect the dots in these other ways, as no one has done as far as we know, ever.
No, and that often comes to me during meditation.
Not during just reading it, later when you're lifting it up, you're doing your contemplation.
Exactly. During meditation, I contemplate what we are covering in the course here, and the ideas come flooding in sometimes.
By the way, it may not seem practical, but it is. It's a Rāja Yoga technique where you calm the mind as best you can through whatever means resonate with you, maybe a few deep breaths or play some music, and then hold a thought in your mind. Practice dharana, which is focus, dhyana, which is this contemplation, extended focus, and that's where this magic starts to happen. It's when you can get the mind focused on something, and then things happen, and you receive things, and you understand things, and you're doing Rāja Yoga.
And that is practical theosophy.
It is practical. Yes, theosophy in practice, yes.
Remember what Damodar taught us. We're not supposed to be trying to empty the mind. We're not supposed to be trying to attain samadhi. We're supposed to learn how to concentrate and then to contemplate.
Yes. Two things on that, because this is very near and dear to what I do all the time in yoga. Samadhi, it's so interesting. Like, you practice the first 7 limbs of Rāja Yoga. We work on our yamas and niyamas actively. Then asana, physical body stuff. We practice that. Pranayama, breathing techniques. We work on controlling our senses. Pratyahara, that's 5. And then dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, the last 3, we practice focus, then we practice holding focus. But samadhi is the interesting one. I am going to say that we don't practice that, it just happens. Once you get really good at the concentration, the contemplation, the samadhi part, it just happens.
It's exactly like siddhis.
Yes.
When you are ready, it comes.
Yes.
You don't try to force it.
Mm-hmm. And then the last thing I just want to say, because it's so good and important, Damodar is right, obviously. Meditation and contemplation, it's not making the mind go blank. It is not that at all. What would be the point of that anyway?
Remember, in one of the letters to Sinnett, he referred to that as quietism.
Oh, okay.
And he said it is paralysis of the soul. You're becoming empty, basically, and you're preparing yourself to become a medium for any astral entity that comes floating around.
The easier way and the recommended way is to give your mind something to focus on, preferably a good positive mantra, a prayer, a positive quality to develop, your heart chakra, your teacher's image, something. Give yourself an anchor and meditate, keep the mind focused, bring the mind back, and that's the process of it. It's not blank, 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 nothing, empty, netty. I mean, that is actually a practice too, but it's something different. Yeah, it's easier too.
And what HPB said in her article on practical occultism is, when you study something, study for 10 minutes and meditate on it for 10 hours.
Oh, okay, nice.
That's where the real understanding
Nice. Wow. 10 minutes of study and then 10. Wow, interesting.
Yeah. All right, we're on letter number 141, again from HPB, and she's going to refer back to what she told Sinnett in her previous letter. Sinnett received this sometime in March 1885, after March 17th, because that's when it was written, but it was received before mid-April based on something else that will set the date. So sometime after March 17th and before mid-April. And what's the first thing she wrote on the letter? Wednesday. No date, but she was in Würzburg, and she was mailing it to London, so she knew it would arrive within a couple of days, so she just writes Wednesday on it. She immediately talks about the previous letter that she had sent a few weeks earlier.
My dear Mr. Sinnett, I asked you, I myself, in my letter to you, please do try and have intuition.
Now, she said, I myself. When she was writing the letter, that was her own words. Now she's going to explain.
You have succeeded, but only partly. You felt that a page or so of it had been dictated to me and that it was really KH, but you have again failed to realize in what a pure spirit of kindness, sympathy, and appreciation of you he dictated those few sentences.
And again, she's using capital H to refer to he, KH. But time and again, Sinnett, because of his disbelief, his lack of faith in HPB, and his suspicions, he is really turning against her and the Mahatmas. He's not sure what's true at this point. And yet, no matter what, both HPB and the Mahatma love him just as much as ever they did. And they're really trying to help him. But he's created this barrier that makes it impossible to get through to him.
You mistook it for criticism. Now, listen to me. Except for a vague recollection that I was writing under his dictation, I could not remember one line of it correctly, even though I read it carefully before I sealed the letter. But what I can swear to is that there was not a shadow of criticism against you personally in the Mahatma's thoughts when transmitting this to me.
Now, she's going to tell us something that's very interesting because she's able to see his thought.
I was writing my letter to you and had written about 3 or 4 pages when the Countess came in and read to me out of your letter those despondent lines in which you said that you were inclined to suspect that the, quote, higher powers do not wish the society to live any longer and that it is useless for you to try or something like that.
And remember, that whole letter was his complaints that he didn't feel like the Mahatmas even wanted the society in London to survive.
I didn't have time to open my mouth for an answer in protest when I saw his reflection over the writing desk and heard the words, "Now write, please."
All right. I'm going to dictate. Write this down.
I did not listen to the words dictated except in a mechanical sort of way, but I know with what attention and intense interest I watched the thought and feeling lights and aura.
So that was visual.
Wow.
She psychically could see his thoughts and the aura, the colors that accompanied those thoughts.
KHs we're talking about.
Yes.
Wow.
And she's going to say something interesting here.
If you understand my meaning, the thought and feeling lights and aura, if you understand my meaning, the Mahatma wanted me to, I suppose, otherwise his thoughts and inner workings would have remained impenetrable.
Yeah. So normally the Mahatma, when they're conveying information, in general, will not allow the chela to see that because they can pick up additional information.
Right.
But she's saying, apparently he wanted me to see that because he didn't prevent me from seeing it.
Interesting.
So they protect themselves even from their own chelas. They divulge information very, very carefully depending on who it is. You have to earn that right. DK, for example, would be given far more access than any of the probationary chelas, or even many of the accepted chelas. So each one has a level of trust that they have earned.
Mm-hmm. And I say to you that never, since you have known him, never was there so much kindness, genuine feeling for you, and an utter absence of criticism or reproach directed to yourself as at that time.
They are pure love. Even Warrior never, ever has any thoughts of unkindness towards anyone.
Or passive aggression. They don't do that.
No,
passive.
not
They
at
don't
all.
gaslight.
No, they don't. And the chelas who suspect them of that and project that onto them are making a serious mistake. Give them the benefit of the doubt, at least.
Don't be ungrateful. Don't misunderstand. Open your inner heart and feeling entirely. And do not judge through your worldly, cold reasoning spectacles.
Yeah.
It's pretty eloquent of her to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Ask the Countess to whom the letter was read, and to whom I told what I say to you now, and to hear which she was so glad for you, for she does sympathize with you in your position, and appreciates all you have done, as much as I do. All you say is perfectly true, and just what I thought I had discerned in the Mahatma's aura.
So now she's going to describe some different colors that were associated with other people.
The yellow-grayish streaks were all directed towards Olcott.
Now, grayish would be somewhat negative.
Mm-hmm.
Yellow can be many different things, so I'm not sure what shade of yellow it was, but it was probably disapproval directed at Olcott.
At the London period, not now. Mohini, Finch, more reddish.
And that's a little stronger, almost not angry, but disapproving.
Yeah. And to others I will not name. Do you want to say anything else about the others?
Well, yeah. We can point out, too, that she doesn't know what's going on with any of the other chelas unless the Mahatmas tell her about it. She doesn't have access to anything that they don't openly and actively give her access to. So a chela could fail and she would not even know.
Your full-size portrait, or double, received a whole torrent of blue, clear, silvery light.
So this is an image that the Mahatma has created of a particular chela. And it has a connection with that chela. So, first of all, it will reflect what is going on in that chela's life, and it is a means for them to influence that chela.
The Prince's Hall, the Kingsford incident, and even Holloway were all far, far away from you in a mist. Hence an undeniable proof that you were implicated in it by no fault of your own, but drawn into it irresistibly by the general karma. Where then is the criticism or reproach? No man living can do more in this world than is in him.
The Prince's Hall is reference to that meeting that they had as a sendoff for HPB and Olcott. Remember how upset Sinnett was at the time? He was so upset that not only did he not prepare a statement, a speech to give, but he didn't really want to do it. And his wife wrote in her diary that he wasn't up to his usual standard of speaking.
Yeah.
Well, of course not, because he was angry and he was resentful at the time.
You could not avoid the Prince's Hall meeting, for the society had chosen a path in which it had to come. But all of you, and you especially, if you had prepared for it as you ought to have done long before, you would have saved the situation by each of you reading a speech that would have struck home to the public instead of what was done.
Yeah, he could have set the note for the rest of them.
Your speech was the only one against which nothing could be said, but because of your ill will, you have been dragged into it. It was so cold, so devoid of enthusiasm or earnestness, that it became like a keynote to the others.
So you inspired the others to be mediocre. Not a very good thing. You want to inspire them to be.
Olcott's was a regular Yankee flapdoodle. Wow. One of the worst.
Yeah. He wasn't a great extemporaneous speaker. In fact, at one point, early on, the Mahatma Serapis ordered him not to give any speeches that weren't written out ahead of time.
That's Olcott we're talking about?
Yes.
Really? Dang.
Yes. He could talk, but he rambled and wandered around. did not focus well. He didn't speak from inspiration like some speakers do.
It's so interesting that the other founders didn't have much in the way of presence or influence as HPB did.
No, Olcott was quite full of himself. He was convinced that he was doing a great job, but behind the scenes we see that he was deceiving himself to quite a big extent. The Mahatmas were ever so appreciative of all of the work that he did. His intentions were pure. They were very good. But his methods and his results were kind of mediocre.
The angel Mohinis.
That's obviously someone's nickname for him.
Was a remarkably stupid one. Jeez.
Well, tell it like it is,
Wow.
HPB.
Babu-like flowers of rhetoric, etc.
So he resorted to the Indian way of giving speeches, very, very flowery.
Jeez. But that's a thing of the past. Of course, it was a failure, but it might have been a success, notwithstanding everything adverse, if it had been prepared beforehand. The public reception was on the path chosen and had to take place, for it would have been worse still had it not come off.
Yeah, so this was a great opportunity that Sinnett missed so many times in these 4 years of communications. He missed really important opportunities that he just blew off. No insight.
Mm-hmm. Holloway was sent from America and was part of the program of trials and destruction.
Remember in the last letter, we learned that she was under the influence of a dukpa.
Oh, gosh. She has done 10 times more harm to you than she did to the society. But this is your fault entirely, and now she is dancing the war dance around Olcott, who is fast friends with her, even more than you were.
So I'm not sure what she means by war dance, because she's trying to manipulate Olcott is what she's doing.
It is a weekly correspondence, incessant and endearing, charming to behold. She is his, quote, dear agent in Brooklyn for things occult, etc. Let it go.
So she's using her feminine wiles once again to try to manipulate a man into thinking of her more kindly than they would normally. She's still promoting herself, maybe not realizing that she has failed as a chela.
Regarding chelas, that is a more serious question. They are no fools, either of them.
She's talking about Mohini and Babaji. Remember that they are creating all kinds of havoc at this time.
They feel, even if they don't know yet, that the abyss between them and masters is being made wider daily. Oh, gosh.
Both are on the verge of failure.
Wow. They feel they are on the left side, and feeling that, they will turn towards that, to which all such failures turn. Oh, gosh. Really?
Yeah, because their ego demands it. So when they begin to fail and they begin to think that they might be failing, instead of saying, okay, I need to get back on track here, they're instead using whatever abilities they've developed to enhance their ego.
Oh,
they're both falling victim to the adoration of all of these European theosophists who are treating them like a rock star.
Why can't they just be humble? And, I feel like if I failed, I would say, gosh, I better do better next time. I better work. Why do they have to go the opposite way? That's so weird, how none of them...
It's ego every single time.
Jeez.
Every single time, it's ego.
If masters ordered them to go back to India, I don't think they would now, under Babaji's inspiration.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Babaji's inspiration is someone on the left-hand path.
Mohini is ruined by him. There's no mistake. And Miss Arundel is going to pot in their company.
Yeah. She mentioned that in the previous letter, that she had fallen victim to this adoration of these two Asian chelas and how exotic they were. And now she's about to lose her opportunity to be a chela.
Jeez. You have to act independently of them, not to break visibly, but to do your own work as though they did not exist. Look here, I want you to write a serious letter to Arthur Gebhardt and tell him all you know about Babaji. He is in full correspondence with the Americans and getting around them as he got around the Gebhardts. What does that mean, getting around them?
I'm not certain, but I think she's saying that he's fooling them.
Being able to influence them or something.
Yeah.
I wrote to him, and so did the Countess, but he will not believe us unless it's corroborated by you. He was surely told by this time that the Countess is entirely under my psychic control. Franz is certain of it, poor man. Unless you warn him, one or both of these chelas are sure to go to America.
Neither one did that I know of, but they created enough damage in Europe that they didn't need to.
If you could bring Miss Leonard to clamor for his departure to India as a settlement, then he would have no excuse to stay. But how to do it? If I could only see and approach the hussy, oh my gosh, I would be ready to sacrifice myself.
This hussy, Miss Leonard, HPB got herself in a lot of trouble. She found out that Mohini was enamored with some of the female admirers that he had accumulated, and that this one had tried to entice him sexually and may or may not have succeeded. So she wrote a damning letter about her influence on him, and she immediately hired an attorney and threatened to sue her.
Wow.
So now HPB's embroiled in possible legal action with this hussy, and she should have waited until she knew all the facts.
Anything to free the society from all this poisonous vegetation. But you can work independently of all of them, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's the best thing to do, is work independently. Let the drama go on around you. You stick to what your job is.
Before the 15th of April, we will be near you, across the stream.
So she's planning to move to Ostend, Belgium at this point, but hasn't left for there yet. And that won't occur until May. So she says before the 15th of April, but she didn't arrive until May.
The Countess will come with me and take her chances until about the middle of May. I have to be near you in case something should happen, for except for her, I don't think I have a real friend in this whole wide world besides yourself and Mrs. Sinnett. Wow, that's crazy.
Wow.
Dang. The Theosophical Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde have done their best.
And I think she's referring to the two Indian chelas.
Wow. I could stop it in 1 hour if I could only pounce on them unexpectedly. But how to do it?
Yeah, she can't even walk, let alone pounce.
Yeah. If I could only arrive and stay in London unknown for 2 days, it would be done.
She's dreaming here.
Could she do that, though? No. I would go to them at 8 in the morning, but I must see you and think it over first. If I only had health, which I don't have, the, quote, 2 years of life and no more of the London doctor brought by Mr. Gebhardt and of my doctor at Adyar are drawing near. Unless Master interferes once more, goodbye. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so she had a couple of doctors who were watching her very closely and are amazed that she's even still alive.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
And all the time she was in Würzburg, she only left the house 3 times. 3 times. And the Countess said that it was a major undertaking just to get everything prepared and make a very short excursion. And it was a big to-do.
You have said nothing of Gladstone's little tricks. Don't you believe in it? Funny. I am told you received a letter about that subject so far back as during the Ilbert Bill row.
That referring to the last letter where she said, "Did you know Gladstone is a secret Roman Catholic?" which was false. So she's, what do you mean? You don't believe what I'm telling you?
Well, I can tell you nice things about the Jesuits and their doings, but of course it's no good. Yet indeed it is serious. Well, goodbye, do right. Yours ever faithfully, HPB. Love to Mrs. Sinnett.
Yes. Love, love, love. She very much loved the Sinnett family, and especially Mr. Sinnett. Mr. Sinnett was writing this book, which was published that same year, Incidents in the Life of Madame Blavatsky, and it had kind of a double effect. People who believed in her found a lot of useful information in it. The people who didn't found more ammunition to attack her with. So that's the status of things in March, April of 1886. We'll pick up the story there in our next session, so don't miss any of them. Thank you for following along.
Good job. Boom.